He currently serves on several advisory boards, ranging from social responsibility to technology, and a board of director at the American Red Cross LA and Drucker School of Management. His passion for combining social good and business has led him to discuss relevant and real-world situations, which are accessible to both students and professionals alike. He is also a trainer at the NASDAQ Entrepreneur Center. In 2015, he was awarded Executive of the Year by the Los Angeles Business Journal and received special United States congressional recognition for outstanding services in the community. He is a contributor of CNN, CBS, Fox News, Phil Hill, Yahoo Finance, and has been also featured in Entrepreneur YYD NASDAQ International and Inc. TD Ameritrade, and more. He received his bachelor's from the University of California, Berkeley, and received his MBA from the Paul Merritt School of Business at University of California, Irvine. He most recently received his corporate governance and board director certification from the University of California, Los Angeles, Anderson School of Management Executive Program.
Well, thank you for having me. That's quite introduction, so I appreciate it. And thanks to everyone who's on here. It's great to see everybody engaged, and looking forward to making this very interactive. So, I mean, I'll take a few minutes to start. I wanted to kind of come on this conversation with everyone around the world, because I really do believe the next generation, which is you all who are on this and listening to this, is going to make a change, and not just make a change with words, make a change that actually may influence and implement changes around the world, not just with governments, but with businesses and consumers. I truly believe that, because this is the generation that's actually already changing the way we look at things, especially in the global business realm. If you think about the power of your voice and the consumer power, it already has changed, which most people thought it would never happen. You know, you talk about things like, we talk about the SDG goals and the things that companies behind that. I mean, the commitment that I think the fellows have here, right? I mean, I think the inclusion, the guiding values, and the collaboration and meaningful of working around the SDG goals is something that's very similar to the business community, or it should be, right? Taking that practice and being able to make it into a piece of the puzzle that you have. Every project matters in a holistic view in the community, and I think that's such an exciting place for me to see, because that doesn't mean change is coming, change is here. And so pretty excited to see that a lot of different values from around the world can make an impact. I can keep going, but I'm happy to take questions, and we can start from there too.
Okay, thank you for those remarks. We would now proceed to the questions. So I actually have one question for you. So Millennium Fellows are at the beginning of their social impact careers. What concrete advice do you have for all 1,092 fellows that are working on addressing the 17 SDGs?
So as you mentioned, my background is in business. And I think one of the things that I've come up and learned in tutelage is understanding the holistic view of the whole situation. So we all know how to do good, right? We know what social impact means. The question becomes, how can you get everyone else involved, right? To buy in the good, right? To be able to want to do it, from businesses and governments, everybody behind. And I think a skill set that I feel when I come across people who want to do good usually find this obstacle. Well, people are not listening to me. They're not wanting change, or it's too hard. And I think the skill set behind social impact really becomes, do you understand, one, the problem, if it's whatever the issue is, and two, do you understand the stakeholders and why the obstacle is, and how do you help the stakeholders, maybe it's the governments or companies or consumers, make it easier for them to understand that rationale and to make change, right? It's almost one more extra step to make actual social impact, because I think we live in a world today, it's so digitally connected that people can do all kinds of research about certain issues. We are now in a position to be able, what's next? Like, why is it not changing? And I think for the fellows in this room, the education level that you all have is far above anyone who's really dived into any of those goals and SDGs and is very well educated. The question becomes, how do you make an impact at the community level in that everybody understands and wants to move in the same direction?
It's clear that you care about social impact investing and value sustainability. From a traditional business standpoint, however, this might not be a priority or necessarily to many. In the private sector space, how do you convince and influence business partners and internal employees that corporate social responsibility is a shared responsibility that a firm must take part in?
Well, it's a great question, and I love that question because I point to one group, you all. Consumers who have the power, which is you all who have the money power, which is millennials, Gen Zs, they use their might. And that makes businesses pay attention. One, correct? And then the employees who are also, they have a voice to make businesses change. You look at what's happened around the world over the last 2 years. Look at what happened to the United Airlines incident with consumers, Google walkout. You look at things of that nature where if you have to be, businesses have to be genuine about their mission internally. It can't just be about writing a check. And again, back to my point, the reason why it doesn't work is because the work that the fellows and SDG, I mean, people want to associate something of the actual good. And that's why I think, again, the social impact is not a buzzword anymore. It can't be. People are too smart to understand, well, that's great, but what does that mean? How many people have you affected? What have you done as a holistic goal? And I think the internal conversation, there's two parts. One is getting the passion around getting the right mission for each company. Each company has its own mission. Obviously, doing good is great, but it's such a broad aspect of social impact. So it's internally where they have to pick a few items that they can make actual impact to it. And the second becomes an ROI issue, right? How do you really convince either the executive team or the board governance side to say why this is important? And obviously it's a long-term mentality to be around with the community, with if it's a product or a service that matters.
That's great. It's true. If any of the fellows have any questions, please put it in the chat box so that we can feature you.
But I want to mention that, you know, we talk about business, but it's about we are equal society. We're all one. We're a global citizenship. We learn from each other. You learn how different trends don't just start in the U.S. I don't know why some people have that notion. It starts from all over the world and it comes. And I think where different cultures and different continents do things more efficient, people pick up on those things. Companies pick up on those things. And shared practices and collaborations are so important. You see more and more multinational companies, corporations are partnering with other companies because they want to make more of an impact, not just to say, well, I did good for one perspective. And like I said, businesses and governments have to be held responsible as citizens that do that.
So I have actually another question. So one of the things we've been doing with the Millennium Fellowship is creating SMART goals and setting objectives for our social impact projects. So do you have any tips on how to create goals?
Yeah, I mean, measurables. I mean, we laugh and it's difficult, but measurables are the ones that get the most attention to all kinds of people. Like, what have you done? I mean, maybe the metrics of a dollar sign is pretty tough sometimes, but the engagement and maybe changing processes. Look at creative ways in your measurables that make change. It could be something small, but obviously it could lead to something bigger. And I think social impact, like any other, maybe you would say department, or it always has to tie into some kind of measurables that you can scale, right? Find things that you can scale that could possibly be more simpler and then have more kind of depth to it. That will get people to want to do more and be staying on track on what the actual goal is, because that's key when solving problems, any kind of problem, especially in social impact.
So how do you measure impact and the goals that you have set?
Personally, for myself?
Yeah.
Well, I keep it simple. I build people, right? And I think that means a lot of things to me. That starts at the top as a mission, and goals underneath it. It comes from, obviously I have because my audience is pretty broad, university students, middle management, and executives, right? How do I make changes in those places or industries that generally that don't, maybe not necessarily care for impact, right? You mentioned ESG. I mean, I've been talking about that for years, but that doesn't mean that it's changed, right? I mean, and I think a lot of that is educating, um, not just governments, but businesses about what what it is to actually make innovation and change management behind it. And I think my goal, it starts simple because I am myself, but when you look at other organizations like the American Red Cross, there's actual measurables from fundraising to how many homes of, like, we had a lot of fires here in Los Angeles. They do a lot of work of fire prevention. Like, I've been on volunteering with them in the past with other volunteers and companies installing free smoke alarms. So question becomes, well, how many fire alarm parties can you install in certain quarters? Like, that has a real metric to it. And then we try to get data on the way back. Well, how many lives did you actually save, right? Because that's kind of hard to get that data. And we've gotten, like, people call back eventually and say, hey, I had a fire, if I didn't have that working, that would have been X, Y, and Z. So really kind of making sure you close the loop the best that you can.
We have a question from Allison. Allison, if you could please unmute yourself, introduce yourself by telling us your name, country, and university.
Hi, my name is Allison Kovacs. I am a fellow at Widener University in Chester, PA in the United States. So I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and saw that you were the vice president of Pinkberry, and I wanted to hear more of, like, your experience for, like, your favorite part of it and, like, how that shaped your experience or expertise today in the roles that you have right now.
Thanks, Allison, for the question. It's funny because Pinkberry was a startup. It was the smallest company that I had worked for, and we grew it to 23 countries from a small shop. And I think there's two things when you grow in multiple markets, new markets, to tie it back to the fellows. You really understand that how each people talk about, well, think act local, think global, but there's no difference between finding really flavor profiles for certain markets and countries and acting like locals. And one of the things I took away, best parts besides obviously eating the yogurt and the fruit, I think was the people that I got to see how innovative, equality could be around the world, right? And how a product like that could provide societies to come together to have a shared experience. And for me, people want a place to enjoy and have an experience to this day. And it's shaped me. It has me more passionate about the global markets because I feel like people don't know. Like, people just don't know how intertwined we are. And so that's kind of part of the reason why, when you catch me on air, I always try to tie the global markets or global countries or certain countries on markets. Part of the reason why you see me on CNBC Africa, on Power Lunch, CGTN, CNN, BBC specifically, talking about different countries, because I think there is a similarity thread to it and just need some people to kind of tie it back. But I think Pinkberry was just a fun place to be because it was a young, cultured, I think it was kind of a fast growing building, and the people were fantastic. And you talk about people who love our consumers who loved and passionate about a product. Those are the greatest stories that I have when people would stop me in the middle of the airport going, I can't believe you took away grapefruit. I can't believe you took away my favorite flavor. Please, please. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. More people need to buy it. But I think that's with any brand. You mention your favorite brands. You make an impact in the community. You do things at the local level, so people think that that's their store, right? And that's what's fun about that.
We also have a question from Marvelous, and if you could please just unmute yourself and introduce yourself, name, country, and university.
Okay, my name is Marvelous. A student in the College of Medicine, University of Lagos. Okay, my question is, business is all about making money, getting profit, and solving problems. Where did this to me? And is it possible to be passionate about business and social impact?
I think I heard beginning part, I think you said businesses were all about profits, and I
I'll
think,
read your question.
okay.
I'll read your question, don't worry. Business is all about money and making profit. Social impact is about impacting life. Solving problems without any really monetary rewards, where do they meet? Is it possible to be passionate about both?
Why can't you do both? Like, I mean, that's, to me, has been something that I've been trying to challenge for years, and it's just not me. And I think you can do both. I think you can make money and give back. And I think it is a mentality. And I'll take it one more step further. If you want to make the most money, is you're going to actually give back, because people are going to stay loyal to you and to that company. It's the same thing about equality and inclusion. Like, if you want to have the most innovative ideas and want to stay ahead of the curve, you want to be inclusive. Again, if you're just focusing on money, I assure you, you'll make more money if you follow this path. And I think because you're looking at this as a long-term, not short-term. And you can argue that maybe in the past, companies haven't done that, but that's fine. That's in the past. Moving forward, this is the way I think why social impact has to be on the forefront of any company that is actually even starting. You see a lot of startups and entrepreneurs coming into the space now, already having some kind of mission on the social impact. And I think the guidance for them is, how do you tie it into profitability, right? And not the other way around and keeping them separate. They have to be intertwined. And I think that's the difference going forward. And the passion, if you're not passionate about social impact, whoever your client is, whoever your consumer is, they will tell. Maybe you can mask it for a little bit, but they can tell, right? And in a competitive world, in a competitive landscape where we are right now, people will just move on. People are willing to pay a few more pennies and dollars for maybe a product that they care that, well, this person's doing great and they're giving $1 to so-and-so and they're transparent. Like, I think transparency has become more key when you do things like in social impact. Great question.
Thank you. So we have another question. It's from Shehu Gambo. If you can unmute yourself and introduce you. We can't hear you. I'll read it. Towards your career, what were your challenges, and did you overcome them in achieving your goals?
Oh, challenges are so fun. Like, I look back at things in my career, and I always wish that someone would make it easier for me. And I never really has had that opportunity. And my career has been, you follow opportunities where it goes. I think the challenges for me in my early career was not getting opportunities. And some can argue that I still don't get the right opportunities for reasons that, I sit on a lot of boards now, or I want to sit on boards now. The average age on the board of directors in the S&P 500 is around north of 60, and only 10 to 11% is women, and only 10 to 11% minorities. So I happen to be probably solely the only one around that table that doesn't look the same when I was coming up. And that doesn't mean it's an excuse, but I think it's made me more passionate about being more inclusive and finding, when I build teams or be around teams that think the same way. The challenges, the obstacles for me has been finding, you want to surround yourself around people that care about your values, care about things that you want to do, and do business the right way. And I think it's easier now. It's easier now when you have more rhetoric. I think back then people had always told me, just stay in one industry and be there for 25 years. Unfortunately, my career didn't go that way. I worked for multiple companies. And that was kind of new at that time. My goal was actually to stay with one company for 30 years, but that didn't happen. And now everyone looks at my career and goes, "Oh wow, that was so great that you must have planned. You got all this different experience." But I never really got credit for it while I was in the middle of it. And so I always look at it as a blessing, because when to turn this question into a positive, even if you don't get an opportunity, you should always be prepared. If someone doesn't give you opportunity, do that project better than they can on the side. Understand that topic better than the person who's telling you to do it. So then when you actually get in the room with the right people and someone asks you a question about, maybe it's social impact, it looks like, and the ins and outs, they will come back to you and go, well, that person knew a lot about, climate change, or that person knew a lot about what the UK is doing right now in that specific thing. We should talk to that person. And so instead of being maybe disgruntled is the right word, but be a student. be a student of the game and be able, and you will find an opportunity when it comes. Sometimes it doesn't come faster than we all like it to. I love these questions. These are great. I can be here all day.
So you mentioned a lot in your answers about opportunities and passions and career goals. And I actually noticed that one, the fellow had a great question. Anna Kate, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, Ryan. I'm Aniket. I'm from India, Chennai. And my question was, like, what type of opportunities do you suggest that like fellows like me who are still in university should look out for if I am interested to have like a full-time, long-term career in development space or to become a social entrepreneur? And I'll also tell you why I asked this question. Like very often when I talk to someone who has worked in development or who is working in as a social entrepreneur, that person has very often suggested me that I should sometime gain experience by working with other organizations that will help me develop some perspective and which will definitely help me gain skills that might be useful when I start a venture of my own or when I'm looking for a long time career.
Yeah, great question. Hopefully the weather's okay out there. um, you know, it's interesting because where you all as fellows are at in your careers, I wish someone would have given me this advice. Since you're at the universities right now, you have an ability to, I don't want to say intern's the right word, but really kind of learn nonprofit organizations, because there's probably, I don't know how many opportunities there are that not, at least over here, I know not everyone's willing to pay, but you have an ability to be super aggressive with organizations, say, let me help you, let me do whatever kind of work. I think the nonprofit organizations are always looking for volunteers and help, right? And if you can pick organizations that maybe are a little bit outside your comfort zone, that maybe obviously you're already probably connected to the ones that you're passionate about, but really kind of seeing what different ways that have grown in different industries, if that makes sense. Like if I was looking at the American Red Cross and I'm on the Red Cross board, like I'd love to see how, the Make-A-Wish Foundation or the Children's Hospital, I'd like to see how other folks have done things in a different way. It adds a lot of value to myself in that way. And then you talked about the word entrepreneurship. I think understanding from, again, biased, business cases of entrepreneurs who failed, right, in other industries that are not socially impact, that maybe they had a great idea and then they commercialized it, but it didn't go well. And to Marvelous's question earlier, when, it's just for profit, you'll find somewhere in there that they missed something, right? And how do you really tie that into in the beginning piece? But if I was in your all shoes, I think gaining any kind of experience and exposing to how organizations are operating, understanding operations, right? The mission statement and the social impact, I know you all already know that. You know why you do it and what's good. It's really understanding the execution piece is really the added value, that the experience, I think, that you can talk in an interview to somebody and say, well, this person really understands the mission, not just the mission, but how hard, difficult it is. They've identified the obstacles and they've identified the things that they can work on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a question from Brianna McNeil. If you could unmute yourself, please, and introduce you.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Yes.
So my question was, considering all that was referenced as far as business and transparency, my question for you, Mr. Patel, is considering what was mentioned thus far, do you realistically see possibly in the near future that there could be a shift between the consumer and business as far as them gravitating toward companies that are more transparent, and could that possibly spark a social impact? And just to further elaborate on that, I live in the United States, and at least from my experience, as most people are aware, I believe money can influence your decision to choose right from wrong, even if it's at the expense of a population of people. So I wanted to ask you that question there.
Yeah, great question. And I see the trend. I mean, I think companies in the past have been some still, have been very reactive to situations, right? And they put themselves in spots where, oh wow, we didn't have a plan behind the social impact, or we don't have a goal. I think everyone needs to have a strategy, and I think we're moving toward transparency. I mean, I don't think we're there 100% yet, but they're being forced. When I say they're being forced, meaning I think there's over 100 plus people on this on this call. They're being forced because we're all talking about this right now, and we're a small group. Imagine this is happening on over and over and over, and the dollar sign counts, and they do feel the effect. And I think that's what excites me about it. I wish it would happen faster. Obviously it's not happening that way, but people and companies, those who don't want to be transparent, are having transparency conversations because we are asking those questions. And so are the shareholders, the stakeholders, right? I mean, we've been talking about board governance, like they should be asking the questions of these kind of things. What does that mean? Because then everybody gets into, I mean, we've seen companies go from potentially going to IPO to not being IPO because certain news has come out about someone not being transparent, right? And I think that's changed. That's never really has happened in the last decade. And I think companies better be paying attention to being more transparent. And I think the ones that do it from the beginning, I think, are well ahead behind it. And I think we're moving toward that. It's almost wish we should, I mean, I hate to tie to gender equity, like gender equity, there's a reason we all should be equal. Like we're all confused why it's not, but then we're also not confused why it's not, because it hasn't changed some people's mindsets of really moving that forward. Do I see it change? Yeah, but it's really slow, and it shouldn't be so slow. So how do you really make that go faster? And I think it's, I can be vocal as much as I can, which I have, but that doesn't really, I mean, we're all just voices. We got to group together, and grouping together is the dollar signs, right? It is about how do you partner or collaborate with people or companies that you care about. And I think they're going to see in the near future that it does matter, and they're going to need to have plans, and it just can't be lip service.
So you talked about the generation and focusing on like money making and things like that. And I just saw in the comments that Tendai, if you could please introduce yourself by stating your name, your university, and where you're from, and then ask your question. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and read the question. It says, our generation is a generation of entrepreneurs, and everyone is looking for ways to make money, but do we balance our desire for money and the need to make social impact? I'm sure there are instances where you will need to choose between social impact and profit. How do you handle that?
Yeah, if I understood the question right, I mean, I think there's different types of organizations, right? You've got the nonprofits, you've got the B Corps. For those who are not familiar with it, it's a transparent process of showing that profits are actually going to social good, right? That's a different standard. And then you have the for-profits. And I think what we've seen, or what I've been seeing, you think about foundation money, you talk about foundations that are trying to do good, and the process now for corporations, nonprofits to get foundation money is very rigorous. Actually, you actually have to show a pretty deep plan about how you're actually going to make the impact. So I feel like we've been in three different sectors now, where like we've been talking about for-profit companies and giving back, but you talk about what the nonprofits have to go through to get foundation money or to raise money from certain places. That money is stipulated, or it has been stipulated now, where it should go for. And I think when you if those donors are looking to make an impact in certain places, it's almost like, where do you go, right? And I think to make it easier on people who are like, if you said, hey, I want to do good in and teach STEM to young boys and girls, like, where do you start? Like, there's so many things and ways that you can do that. And I think when you talk about social impact and how you pick to set up your organization, that's who you attract. So I don't know if that was kind of the question that was going toward, but I think you get kind of pushed to each organization on what you want to do on the passionate side. And that's kind of how you should either start your own organization. Like, I've seen founders and startups go, well, I'm just going to make this a nonprofit, or I don't want to deal with the profitability, or I want the profit to drive the good. There's just different philosophies on how you scale it. I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
So we have time for one or two more questions. I see one from Ondiek Cynthia. If you could please unmute yourself and introduce yourself by telling us your name, country, and university. Okay, good. I'll read it. What's one thing that motivated you towards your success despite the challenges encountered when starting a social entrepreneurship?
That, you know, I always wished that someone would help me. I think that was kind of, I always, when I was at undergrad or at Cal, like I always wish somebody would just give me some kind of advice that would be like, hey, this I just needed information. I didn't want a handout. I didn't want, well, it'd be nice to get a silver spoon, but I didn't get that. But, you know, I told myself that if I ever came in some kind of position, you know, even though I think I have a long way to go, that I could help somebody and change this pattern of, well, I did it this way, so you should do it this way, right? And that's why I'm on this call today. I think that you think about the journey and what you all as fellows are doing, you're changing the system of how, you know, on how we look at things and how you do work and things, right? I think that to me is motivating enough, because that is tremendous. I was speaking to a law firm a few months ago, where most people know the legal industry, you know, it's about money, right? So new graduates come out, they'll usually pick the highest salary. Well, this firm's told me, Ryan, these new graduates are asking me, well, what are you doing for volunteerism? Like, how many hours are you doing? Like, what is it that you're doing? They lost that recruiter. They went to some other firm. They took less money because they believed that that firm was doing more things in the match their mission. So I tell a law firm, yeah, it's not about just creating, hey, we do good and we give you hours. Like, what actually are you doing? And to me, that's what excites me, is that that's a change of a whole industry. That's a change of thinking. And I think that's, you know, that what keeps me going, because that's, if I look above me and see how there is no change, I would get lost. It would be frustrating. But I'm looking at what is kind of coming up right behind me, and that's what's actually making a difference and change. That excites me to continue to do things like this, to share whatever I can, because I know you all will make it better. My goal here isn't to share my experience for you to do it. I hope you don't take that away. I want you to take what I say and make it better. So that way you can pass that along to the next person who asks you a question. And I think that's how we should live in this ecosystem.
Yeah. So we have our last question. This one is from Ehirovo Christopher. If you could please unmute yourself and introduce yourself by telling us your name, country, and university.
Talking about reality, the growth room, that it should be helpful.
Okay.
It's like the repetition. The temperature in the growth room should range from this one. The photo period should range from.
I'll, just to make it clear, I'll read it for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Is it possible as an international student who is studying far from his or her country and who loves to be an entrepreneur and make a social impact in his country, what would be your advice on the challenges that will appear as a result of the distance?
Well, obviously not being in market is a challenge, right? I mean, I think because you're not on the ground and tying it. I mean, in an ideal world, and if you had all the resources, you'd be able to create a team and make that work. But, you know, what I've seen governments specifically, maybe there's an embassy or like business councils or other kind of councils that are in your neighborhood, and being able to be more impactful or finding ways to give back in that way keeps you still tied. I think the biggest thing is, how do you still tie your influence to your country, right? And bringing resources or ideas that maybe that can be shared between both countries, right? To that degree. I think getting involved with organizations that are multinational, or in your case, in both countries, and are willing, obviously, we live in a digital telecommuting ways that you can, get on a call like this and talk to everyone in the world, and solving problems, and maybe solving problems that, you pick one or two that you really care about and make connections for that group in that country to people maybe where you are, to where they can better educate. I think kind of bridging that gap. I mean, yes, it is difficult. And we can just sit here and go, well, I'm just going to wait until I come back in the country and then make an impact. But I feel like if you have an opportunity and you have the time to make those connections before you come back, I think it'll be a smoother process and more of an impact behind it.
So that's a wrap for all the questions. I would like to thank you so much, Mr. Patel, for taking the time out for not just sharing your experiences, but basically giving us advice and tips and being the help that you wish you had, as you mentioned earlier, for basically giving us tips to helping us going out and taking action and becoming better entrepreneurs. So the fellows would love to keep in touch with you. What would be the best way to keep in touch?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Ryan Patel Global, if you like. Obviously you can follow me on LinkedIn as well. We'll respond. And I do want to say one thing. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat too while you guys were talking. I am so humbled that you all have come on this, those who were able to make this. I know the time difference and changes, and to come here and talk about it, and even the comments I'm seeing, all the kind words and just asking these insightful questions. Like, sometimes you don't know it, but these are courageous These are courageous. Like, I don't know if I could come on a Skype call and want to ask a question to anybody, let alone something that you're passionate about. And don't forget that you are courageous. You are doing something that is different. It is difficult at times, but that passion starts with you. And like I said, I'm humbled that you guys took the time to come on this and interact with me, as obviously it's fun for me to see the change makers, as they would say, in the world. And I love the global aspect. Take advantage of this, that you can be tied to many different people in different countries. That's who you should be connecting with, because there's so much you can learn from each other. And that kind of expertise, nobody can teach you. You can only teach yourself to be able to do that. So kudos to you all.
Thank you for the amazing talk. I'd also like to thank all the fellows who joined the webinar today, and I hope that you were able to gain some great insights. And we look forward to seeing you all again on our next webinar with Juan Shelby next Thursday, October 23rd, 2019, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. You can register in Crew or in the Millennium Fellowship website. Thank you all for attending the webinar. And thank you, Ms. Patel.
Thanks. Thank you too.